So I'm not a professor, I'm not a lecturer, I'm a frontline guy, been doing economic development for 35 plus years. We changed economic development back in '87 by adding an entrepreneurial approach. What I'd like to do is make this a little more interactive as we go, pose some questions, take some questions, vote. We're going to take polls, assuming that it works, which is what we were trying to get to work here. I need to get some baselines. Was anybody in the Taubman Center seminar last fall that I gave? Okay. I apologize. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, but there's a lot of new stuff here. How many people are familiar with complex adaptive systems? Okay, fewer than I thought there might. I'm going to wade into that. How many people know Mr. Ned Ludd? Don't say anything. Anyone familiar with the term economic gardening before today? Okay, well, we're starting at ground zero. Good, because that's what I'm prepared to say. So this is just established my credentials. If you go in and Google economic gardening, put it in quotes, or you're going to get vegetable gardens, you're going to see about 100,000 hits from some pretty major organizations in there. This is just start cold. I'm going to take the first poll, and I'm not sure how it works. Do they just click it up on their smartphones? Here's a question I want to ask. Does everyone benefit from our economic system? What if I said anybody in this country can buy and probably has bought an HD TV for $49? What if I said that you took everything in that Walmart, Super Walmart, Costco, Target, whatever, and took it out that parking lot and piled it up, that almost everyone in America can buy almost everything in that pile? And this is for the quants. This is, I know that there are 10,000s of our population are homeless, but 334 million people do have homes. Let's take the poll again. Does everyone benefit from our economic system? Yes? 1, 2, 3. No? Still a vast, vast majority. Okay, even though anybody can buy anything. May not be able to buy a Mercedes. Let me ask a different question. I asked about Ned Ludd, but it's these rowdy little band of Luddites that we're talking about. How many people know Luddites if I said that? Okay, everybody's had the economics course, right? For those that don't know, they were skilled laborers in England. They made high quality custom fabrics in their homes, textiles, brocaded kinds of things. Did it by hand, like Navajos do it today. When the Industrial Revolution came along to England, the factory owners replaced them with these automated looms. Keep track of automated. That's what I want to talk to all the way through here. So the looms destroyed the weavers' jobs, and the weavers smashed the looms. Seemed like a real straightforward solution at the time. I found this photo in Google. It was titled Wandering Luddite, and it said they roamed the countryside looking for work. So let's change the question a little bit. Should public policy encourage automation, mechanization, industrialization, technology? I'm going to use the word automation all the way through. Or should it discourage automation? Or should it be no public policy whatsoever? Right? This is a private sector matter. You know, things work out. Let her rip. Okay, so here's your three choices. Encourage public policy encouraging automation. 1, 2. Is this additional people voting? Let me start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. How many do we have in here? 30 maybe? So half of the people. 16 out of whatever many people we got. Thank you. Discourage, because we still got 2 other categories. Industrial policy to discourage automation, 1, 2. Okay. What about no public policy? This is the private sector thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. Getting a little bit of split in the population. How many people have been to Gary, Indiana, or at least know the story of Gary? Half of you. These are pictures of the real Gary. If you haven't been there, it's at the bottom of Lake Michigan. I used to fly into Chicago, drive around the end of Lake Michigan, going over to the state of Michigan. And the interstate goes right through. I'd get off every once in a while and drive around to see what was happening there. It was established by U.S. Steel, one of the biggest steel mills in the country. And at the height of it, it employed 30,000 people. The town was 170,000. Let me give you the numbers are there, down to about 3,000, and the population's down about 70,000. So they've lost 100,000 people. And, they've lost jobs. You can see the homes. You can see the downtown. It's a major mess. I feel for it. I'm not criticizing it. I feel for Gary. Okay, let's take the poll again. So most of those jobs, well, first of all, those jobs went a couple places. Some of them went to China, and other places were steel mills. Some of those jobs just automated. They just got rid of the people. So they dropped down, from 30 to 3,000, 170 to 70,000. Let's take the poll again. How many people think we ought to encourage automation as a public policy? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 out of our 30-some, so maybe a third. Discourage automation as a public policy. Nobody's willing to discourage it, even though people in Gary don't have places to live anymore. How about no public policy? Let it go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. How many people know or have heard of or been to Waukeeta, Oklahoma? That's a 0. If you heard of it at all, it's probably because you saw the movie Twister. And this was a movie about storm chasers, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton. Waukeeta is a town that gets destroyed at the end of the movie, up there at the top. And there's this scene where they're eating at Aunt Meg's house, and the news report comes on. There's an F4 tornado. They go running out of the house, get in their cars, drive, storm, fast out of town. And there's a helicopter shot following them leaving town. And when they get to the edge, it rises up, and you can see the Waukeeta water tower. Waukeeta happens to be my hometown. My parents live across the street from that water tower. It was established in 1893 in the Cherokee Strip land run. 100,000 people, as far down as you can see in that photo, lined up on the Kansas state line so they could claim land in the strip. And all you had to do, race in, be the first, drive a stake with a white flag into the ground. You got 160 acres. Yours to do whatever you wanted to. Build a house, you could farm it, you can plot a town. It was free, absolutely free. 2 of my great-grandfathers were in that race. They're in that photo somewhere. I grew up on the farm that one of those great-grandfathers staked in that race. And Waukeeta at the time had probably 500 people, but there were farms every 160 acres all the way around. My dad's in the Navy, he's in the South Pacific, comes home, wants to start a family like they all did, and the original baby boom. I am a baby. When I grew up, baby boomers were people born in 46, 47, 48. That's when everybody came home and started families. Town was full of kids. Stores are full. Schools are bulging. Everything's thriving. So after the run, a family farm could farm a quarter section of land. Quarter section is a half mile. Section is a mile by a mile. And maybe 2 quarters at the absolute best. All that land was planted to wheat. And it took a crew of about 10 to 15 men to harvest it and to run the machine over several weeks. Randy Laney, who was a high school classmate of mine, went to college, came back to farm, and Randy, with the help of 3 employees, can cut more wheat in the morning than that threshing crew could cut in 2 weeks. Randy farms 48 quarters. 48 of those farm families that staked that original land are gone. So all the farm families settled in that land, almost all of them, or 1893 are gone. The jobs are gone. The stores that they used to shop to on Saturday are gone. Might be 200 people left in town. Household income is barely 30,000. Most people on Social Security. Average age, 80. Randy skews those numbers a lot in terms of average household income. And I only use Waukeeta as an example because I know it. But this same story occurs all through the Great Plains and the Rust Belt in the Midwest and in the South and in the timber towns and in the fishing towns. Anything that's a natural resource production town in this country looks a lot like this story. Wheat, corn, cotton, tobacco, timber, fishing, mining. Towns that process natural resources are dying all over the country. It's not just Waukeeta. You haven't seen them, take a road trip. Just stay off the interstates. You're going to see what the other half of this country looks like. Where'd those farmers go? What if I said some of them went to work for Boeing in Wichita, 90 miles away from my hometown? On a farm, when something breaks down, you got to fix it yourself. Nobody's coming. And most farmers have deep mechanical knowledge and tools, and a lot of them started making jet airplanes at a much higher income. So let's see where we stand again. We're going to ask both questions at the same time. Should public policy encourage automation, discourage automation, or be no public policy, with the understanding we started out with a small group of Luddites, England, early 1800s, long ways off. Nobody much cared about them. Small problem. We expanded it out to Gary, Indiana. Well, what about if it's a whole town? What if it's a small city that just gets decimated because of automation? And we've expanded that out to Waukeeta and all the Waukeetas across the country that are decimated. Should public policy increase automation, decrease, be no public policy? Increase automation. 1, 2, 3. Is anybody changing their mind on this thing? Put your hands up again so I can get a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, we're coming across. Decrease automation. Okay. No public policy. 1, 2, you're voting the same all the way through at least. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. People are thinking about it. Are you keeping track of my numbers for me? Thank you. Let me ask the second question. Does everyone benefit from the economic system? Same issue. Small groups, bigger city, a lot of people. But we got Walmart, we got Costco, and you can buy tons and tons of stuff. Does everyone benefit from the economic system? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. No. All the rest of the people. Does anybody know how many people are in here? 30, 36, 38, something like that. I want to talk about something that's messy from our business, and we have to deal with it every day. And I've always called it capitalism's conundrum. Here's what I think, because people tend to argue, oh, capitalism does everything and capitalism doesn't do anything. And, maybe we ought to look at different systems, on and on and on. I think capitalism is very good at innovating new things to solve problems. I think it's the best in the world. And I also think that it makes things cheaper and it gets supply to demand efficiently. It's hard to argue with those things. There's data behind that. Its drawbacks is you can't have low wages, low price and high wages. It's two sides of the same coin. Wages is part of price, which is what's going up and down here. It throws people out of work. I don't think anybody's going to argue that there's a lot of people that have got thrown out of work, if nothing else, Gary. And it destroys communities. What we're wrestling with, I think, is this little piece of logic is you can't have low prices and high wages, and they're two sides of the same coin. So what we're dealing with right now is everybody's wages are rising. In Evergreen, Colorado, where I live, you can go to work for Wendy's, excuse me, started to say Burger Chef, but they're long gone. $20. That used to be car wages, automobile wages. But the hamburgers are $10. And so you give people raises to work at Wendy's, and it's like, oh, that's good. And it's like, well, the prices just went up. Oh, well, that's bad. That's a conundrum in my mind. I don't think we can get around it. I'm going to talk about what we do about that sort of thing. But driving down prices throws people out of work, destroys communities. It's a hard fact to get around. Let me switch for just a little bit. I want to talk about economic gardening. This is Littleton, Colorado, where I worked for 25 years. I live in Evergreen, but I worked in Littleton. That's our transit station. Did we send out an article about the history of economic gardening? Okay, all right, that's fine. It's not shades of gray, 50 Shades of Gray anyways. You got plenty of things to read. Before 1987, economic development was about my town getting your towns, companies to move to my town. That's the basic deal. And there's a man over here that probably just lights up hearing that because there is lots and lots of issues around the basic issues of incentive packages and are they fair and are they transparent and on and on and on. Probably ought to let Greg do the last half of this. So the whole idea of economic gardening was invented in Mississippi, more or less, and all the things that they do, which the first thing they did was they come up to New England and took your textile mills and moved them down to Mississippi because they had cheaper wages, they had cheaper land, they had cheaper taxes, they had cheaper virtually anything. And so that was the basic deal is we'll find a cheaper place for you to do business. Now, if that seems on paper to be a little bit sketchy, that's what's still being done today, and that's kind of what set us off. So if that is called economic hunting, we'll go somewhere and bring a company to us. What we decided to do is stay home and work with the local entrepreneurs, weed, water, fertilizer, do those kinds of things. So let me lay out some basic principles around our program. And I know this is a little hard to read, but all that information is in the blue swath. See if I can point it out here. This is titled Most Jobs Are Local. This is by state, running down this side. And anything in brown was recruited in. So this darkest brown that you see here was a straightforward recruiting deal, which is what economic development's been about forever and ever. The next brown means, well, we recruited them last year and they did some jobs this year. We'll go ahead and give them credit. They weren't our jobs, they weren't local. And then this brown is franchises, and that's McDonald's. They're Illinois, but they're creating jobs here. This is jobs that were created locally in a company. Look at that 80% line. Every state in the union creates jobs locally. A lot. 90% line running down through there. Some of them are as high as 90% of the jobs are created locally. This is the other chart, and I apologize. This is a screen chapter. There's actually I've captured. There's actually two charts on here. What I want you to pay attention to is this red line and this red line. This is by size of company, and we deal with companies that are stage 2, 10 to 100 employees, 1 to 50 million in sales. That size of company runs 18, 20%, 15%, but it's really stable in all kinds of economic situations, all parts of the country. Down here, this is, okay, by size of company, those stage 2 companies, how many jobs did they create? That's the 40% line right there. They're bouncing around 38, 39, 40% in there. Here's a simpler way to look at it. And that is, as a general rule of thumb, you can say those stage 2 companies, which are 15% of the total, are producing about 40% of the jobs. They're punching way above their weight. That's who we work with. This next principle of economic gardening is the idea that the wealth of a community is dependent on a small group of companies. We use a bathtub analogy when we're talking to councils and mayors. Tub is the community. Water in the tub is analogous to money circulating between the local businesses. So the CPA goes to the restaurant uses the printer goes to CPA, money's just circulating around in there. And theoretically, that town could live forever. My town could have lived forever if it made everything it needed. But no town does. New York City does not make everything it needs. Doesn't make its own cars. Doesn't grow its own wheat. Doesn't make its own carpet. Most of the carpet in this country is made in Dalton, Georgia. So every time you buy a new car from Detroit or Tennessee, or you take your family down to Disney World, some of that money is leaving town. Money in town drops down. There's less money. CPA only eats out once a week instead of 3 times. The restaurant decides, they're not going to go get things printed. The printer decides they're going to do their own taxes this year. But obviously, there's another factor in this, and that is the tub gets refilled by a faucet. By selling things to the outside world, bringing them in. Gary, it was steel. Waukeeta, it was wheat. As long as that faucet is running at the same rate as the drain, the town's stable. If the faucet runs faster than the drain, town grows. More money flow around with the local stores. I want to move the camera in on a tight shot of that faucet because who is that? Well, it turns out it's mostly those stage 2 entrepreneurial growth companies that sell innovation to external markets. That sentence summarizes 30 years of experience. If you keep track of anything, just learn that. So this is those companies we saw back in the starting slide. The people who are creating so many jobs. In economic gardening, our focus is on the small group of companies. That's all we do. If they do well, the entire community does well. Not only is the CPA back to eating 3 times a week, and now, because it's growing, there's a new chocolate shop that opens up down on Main Street. So I want to introduce complex adaptive system, which is really complex, but I'm not going to go through it in great detail. But it's a new science created in 1984, Santa Fe Institute, New Mexico. Dr. Hausman, I think a bunch of you have classes with him, is the co-chair of the science board down there. He's one of the people who helped create it. All we did was learn about it and apply it to our business. So in the simplest terms, complex science studies the interaction and the adaptations of individual agents. Things that can adapt and interact. If that sounds like life, sounds like business, it's because it is. Life and business are complex adaptive systems. From the economic gardening standpoint, the most important thing is that complexity creates emergent systems, new properties, new characteristics, new signatures that are not found in those component parts. And these emergent systems have their own outcomes, but they're not planned. Keep track of that little sentence. This is going to be a big factor in the benefiting conversation. Let me give you an example of why I think this is important. Our political system was planned. They decided there'd be 3 equal branches of government, there'd be checks and balances, 2 branches of the legislature for the big states, the small states, Bill of Rights. We planned the political system. None of that is true about the economic system. It was not planned. No one said, we need money, and we probably have banks, and probably interest rates, and maybe stocks and bonds and derivatives, on and on. All of these emerged as part of a complex adaptive system. So we have a system that has outcomes, but not planned objectives. So when people talk about market failures, it's like, what's the failure? There was never a proposal of what it was supposed to do. It just emerged and started to operate. So I want to take a look at a couple of system properties that emerged, and they're called commodity traps and leverage points. Commodity traps is absolute core in my idea of why I think things are going wrong. There's Raphael here. Raphael thinks I have a 1-note drum because that's all I talk about. Commodity traps. Simplest way, this is what we use to explain to council. So simplest way to think about that is you can't differentiate it. And we use salt because it's the simplest way to think about it. And on the lower left, that's my business is in the orange and yours is in the white. I'm selling salt for $2. You're selling it for $1.80. And the consumer's going, well, this is a short conversation. I'll take the cheap one. Thank you. So the bar chart to the right, all the customers shifted to you. On the bar chart to the right, the only way for me to get back into business is I got to drop my price. You're at $1.80, so I'm now at $1.60. But I also got to get my expenses down. And I've got to drive out, 50, 60 cents worth of expenses in there. So I order in bigger quantities and, I find more efficient systems. But there's a big number in that income statement, and it's wages. And it's like, whoa. Can we get rid of some of these wages? And so I move them from the Union North down to the right to work South, and then to Mexico, and then to China, because I'm getting cheaper and cheaper labor all the way. But sooner, and as soon as I do that, and I drive mine back down, you are back in to the same situation that I had. So you go, okay, got to drop my price below you, got to get my expenses down, get my wages down. And pretty soon, probably both of us automate, the thing that we voted on all the way through there, and the thing that we saw had real impact in real communities and real people. And it's like, we got a system operating here. And this is like excuse me. Let me back up just a second. This is like a arms race. Nobody wants to do an arms race, but you just built your arms and like, oh my God, we got to build ours. Now you got to build. This is exactly the same, except it's working downward. It's like, oh, you drop your prices. I don't want to drop my prices, but I'm losing all my customers to you. I'll drop my prices and you drop yours. We're racing to the bottom, and the winner is the person that gets to 0 first. On paper, you're going, what? How does this work over the long run? So that, in essence, is what a commodity trap is about. If you get to the situation where you can't differentiate anymore, you're commoditized. And once you're commoditized, you're in this game whether you want to be in it or not. Let me talk about, this is a core strategy that we use every company we deal with. We've had about 3,500 some companies over the years. So we've done this a bunch of times. So all businesses can be defined as having a profit margin on their products times the number of products they sell, margin times volume, and that allows us to construct this diagram. So on the left-hand side, You've got volume running from low to high. Down at the bottom, you've got margin running low to high. That creates 4 quadrants out there. 2 of those quadrants are not real. Stop and think about it. High margin, high volume. We make $1 million in what we're selling, and we're selling 1 million of them. It's like a gold rush. You're going to wake up in the morning and people are going to be camped all up and down the street. It's going to exist for about a nanosecond out there. The other one that doesn't exist, these are the gray ones, is the Death Valley, and that is we don't make very much on what we sell, but don't worry about it because we're not selling very much. Low volume, low margin. It's like, well, what's the point? Where are we going to work every day? So what you're going to find is that what we found, let me put it that way, is that all businesses have 1 or 2 core strategies. They're either commodity and they say, you know what, we're going to fight it out on price. We're Walmart, we're anybody that's producing big commoditized things. The soap that you can buy at Walmart's the same as at Kroger's, the same at Costco. And it's like, well, they sell it cheaper down here. So the rules for winning is to get big and drive your costs down. Real simple. And you got to make a choice. We always tell our businesses, we're not telling you, we're not advising you, we're explaining how it works. You just tell us how you guys work. The other is a niche strategy. And a niche strategy, niche in the East, niche in the West. I'm from the West. Niche strategy is the rules for winning is that you got to constantly innovate. You got to open up something, a gap. And so I make something that you want that you don't make, and you're going, wow, that's really expensive. You got that big, huge margin built in there, but I need it really bad, and so I'm willing to pay for it. It's going to exist for a little while until your competitors go, we can do that. Apple, 18 months, Samsung, Apple, Samsung. So the game there is you just got to keep opening up the gap on each one of the competitors you have. So if you're in the commodity quadrant, low price, high volume, Walmart. If you're in the, I just made this one up. So if you're in the niche, it's low volume, high margins. So software for a nuclear plant, let's say not a lot of people do that, and it costs a lot of money to do it, and you've got a monopoly. There's something else in the system. It's called leverage points. And HVAC is heating, ventilation, air conditioning, so your heating, cooling system. The leverage, the point to be made in systems thinking is that if you change the outcome of a system, you change it by the leverage point. And in the leverage point in the heating system is that thermostat. So let's say it's too hot. And so we go, okay, well, let's open up all the doors and the windows to cool it down. What that does is activate that thermostat to kick the heat back on. That's the leverage point. You can go out there on the edges and try to make changes. Go find the leverage point. In our economic system, we think the leverage point is supply and demand. So what happens in innovation? I open up a gap. You try to close it down on me. But here's the thing to think about it is you do not have to be the absolute best. You just got to be better than the competitors. And I'll give you an example. We work with a lot of job shop mill companies in the Midwest, and they've all got 5-axis CNC machines. A CNC machine is computer numeric control. It can make steel 1/5000th of an inch, can drill holes. It's the best you can get. But guess what? A lot of other people have 5-axis CNC machines, and they got them in China, and they got them all over. They got them out in California, and so they are still commoditized. And if you stop and think about it, it's just exactly like salt. And it's like, we're doing the best. We're doing the best things. So here's the basic commodity trap. You can do one or two things. You could be in the race to the bottom. You can be in the race to the top. Those are the 2 core strategies. 4 maps, and then we're done. So the argument I'm making is that what's causing the problems in our country is areas that got commoditized. Those people, and I feel for them, they got thrown out of their jobs. If you were working in Gary, Indiana, you You work there 35 years, you got raises, you raise your children, you participate in the churches, you do all the good things from a personal standpoint, and you lost your job. And it's like, that's not right. Here's what's happening is this is an innovation atlas, and I want you to pay attention to 4 patterns because these 4 maps are exactly the same. These 4 areas on the West Coast, they're not very big, geography-wise. This is real big geography-wise, but nobody lives there. So this is Montana and the Dakotas. Seattle, Portland, Bay Area, LA, San Diego. That pattern, this is the Boston to Washington. That's innovation. This pattern across the South has low levels of innovation. These areas from here, running Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, if that list sounds familiar, it's because that's those are the people who are going to decide the election. If you don't live in one of those states, it doesn't make any difference how you vote. It's those 6 states. Take a look at household income. Same pattern, running down this side, same pattern running down this side, working very well. Household income very low across the South. Take a look at, this is called prosperous and distressed communities. Pattern, problem here. This is the dicey states because we don't know which way they're going to go. Election results of the last election, there, right across here, dicey and through this area. Closing arguments. Here's a simple version of our take on whether the economy is working for everyone. Capitalism has a conundrum built into it. It's good at innovation, it's good at driving down prices, but to do that, it throws people out of work and it destroys communities. And the mechanism behind that is commoditization. It's buried in there. It's like a commodity trap, and it's like a whirlpool in our economy. And if you slip into that commodity trap, your future is not going to look very well. Ultimately it drives prices down, and eventually they just automate it like they did the weavers way back in the first part of this. That's the commodity trap. We think public policy ought to be about moving people forward. Commoditization is the root of poverty, and it's on the back end. Innovation is the root of wealth, and it's on the front end, and it's pretty clear. Look at those maps. The big data is there. Public policy ought to be moving people from the back end to the front end. And from our standpoint, what we do with economic gardening, there's 4 principles. Local, it's already 80%. Stage 2,